Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jae Kook Cha from Yonsei University in Seoul, Korea. Also, I'm an osteology former scholar of Complutense University in Madrid. I'd like to welcome all of you to this session, and I'm honored to be the moderator of this valuable session. So, the focus of our session is about the advice for the next regeneration from the Osteology Honorary board members. So the next regeneration is a catchphrase of this symposium, which means the next generation of regenerative therapy, but also the next generation of dentists, researchers, and students as well. Therefore, we have prepared a special talk with superstars in the field of regeneration. And without further ado, I'd like to introduce our honorary board members. So we have here with us Professor Wilfried Wagner, Professor Mario Nevins, and Professor Georg Wacek, and Professor Frederick Neuka. Okay. So I have prepared some questions for the next generation, and also I surveyed some questions from the osteology scholars as representatives of the next generation. So the first question is start of the research career. Perhaps could you tell us about the how and when you had decided to devote yourself to the research field? Professor Wagner?
Yes, when I come again to the university after some years in the dental office, I go to the university for tumor biology. Mm-hmm. But when I started in this university, there was 3 calcium phosphate and bios and some other materials, and I was interested in this material and started with animal research and clinical research. That was the beginning with the topic of dental material.
Mm-hmm. And you, Professor Mario Nevins?
I practiced for about 25 years before I made the change. But I was had the opportunity to become a principal investigator after the human genome and to explore the possibilities of what could be done with the proteins BMP2 and platelet-derived growth factor. As we published those findings from research, many other opportunities began to appear to test dental materials that there were not enough information known about, but everybody was using. And that changed my career.
Wow. And Professor Wacek, how about you?
Yes, after finishing my medical education, I wanted to go to the university. And if you want to go to a university, you have to do research. This is a must. Otherwise, your career will be finished pretty soon. So I started with tumor surgery at the maxillofacial department, tumor surgery and research in tumors and malformations. And this I have done for 10 years. And after that time, I changed my main interest to oral surgery and started with regeneration of bone, with implantology and so on. So I can divide my research career in 2 parts.
And what was your then first research topic when was your student?
Well, I think your question is focusing what was the moment that bring us to a change. Yeah? So I think after my medical degree, I had the opportunity to work in a scientific project, in a scientific team. And I think that was the most important aspect. I came into a field I never knew before. I learned new tools to investigate, and I think that was most important. In those days, I worked more in the field of nerve regeneration. So that was the topic I was looking for in that group. And later on, I was more or less fascinated by, let's say, by the word osseointegration, because the integrating of foreign materials into the living body, as Branema told us in those days, that was in the 80s. Yeah? So that gave a pretty much input into my work, coming back from nerve regeneration to bone regeneration.
Thank you. Thank you for your answer. So since then, you have had a very successful professional career from now on, so which must have been highly stressful at point. So could you tell us how you control your mind when things get rough? Maybe this is a too personal question, but the young researchers want to know how to control your mind when the research goes wrong or something gets tough. Professor Wagner?
I think the most important point that you have to be interested in a wide field, not only in one focus point, because over the time you have always some points which just stops and not go on. And then you have to make a break and look for other things. And after some time you start again and you will be happy that it goes on. Therefore, I believe most important is that you stay interesting in the fields in a wide scope, not only in one point.
Okay, thank you. And how about you, Aaron Evans?
I think you have to think through things and be prepared for what you're going to do before you actually do something. And my experience with residents is that frequently they ask, what should I do? It's what's important is what they're thinking and what the need is. And as I think every one of us has said, there were a lot of materials with inadequate evidence of what you could get as a result. So you have to have some guidance in the beginning. You can't just read a magazine.
So anyway, we have to keep some interest and take the time to control our mind. And okay, thank you. And moving on to the next question, is a turning point of the research career. In my case, studying abroad was a huge turning point in my research career. And also meeting a mentor like Mariano Sanz was another huge turning point. Is there any significant turning point in your research career, Professor?
Of course, it's a start. You need a perfect guidance for research. You need someone who tells you the correct direction of your research. You need someone who tells you the concept and the basics. And this is, of course, if you don't have someone who tells you how to start a project, how to perform a project, and how to finish, of course. And that's awful, of course, because this is a must. You need a guidance how to perform perfect research.
Thank you. How about you?
Well, I mentioned it already. I think it's a team approach today. And when you finish your studies in dentistry or medicine or whatever it is, the first step is you have to learn to work in a team. And as you mentioned, if there are rough times, there are two possibilities. The project you have planned and discussed with other people who are well informed in the field, the results are poor. And the next point is that rough times can show up in a team, in the lab, for example, due to emotions. And you have to get calm.
Okay.
And you have to learn the lesson that only in an open discussion there may be a progress. I think that is for me the most important aspect, and we have to learn in the very beginning to be open-minded and not fixed just to a single question, to be open-minded, to look for another approach to solve the problem in the team.
Thank you for your valuable input. So another thing that young researchers are curious about is selecting worthwhile research topic. In my case, I have to keep the spectrum as broad as possible, as you said, because I'm still at the start line of the research career. So I would like to ask for advice on selecting a lifetime research topic. It's quite a very broad question, but I want to ask you some advice. Professor?
I don't believe in a lifetime question. So the question is coming up out of the clinical work you are doing. And if you are working in a team, as Professor Neuker mentioned, you see some questions which are open and which are not answered. And if you are interested in this topic. And if you are interested, you have the power to solve this problem. Therefore, the intrinsic activity, the intrinsic interest for me is the most important point to bring you in a team approach.
How about you, Myron Davis, Professor?
I think there are different directions for research. If this is to satisfy the requirements for a master's degree, that's one level of research where you learn how to prepare the protocol for it, you learn how to publish it, you learn how to organize the animals, how to select which level, because it's unusual at that time to do human research. If you're going for a serious PhD, I'm at Harvard University, that is an extra 4 or 5 years, then you're expected to participate in a project where you're going to make a difference. It's taken for granted that you have learned the early part,
Okay.
and now you are working frequently with the medical school to pursue something that may have a very minor area in dentistry, but you are doing a much higher level of research. But you have to grow. You can't just you can't create a rocket to go to the moon the first time you do research.
How do you think about this?
I agree with Professor Magnus that you cannot determine this is the topic of my life. So, because it is a principle since decades for me that if someone claims this topic is not interesting, then he only admits that he doesn't know anything about it. Because if you learn, if you immerse in a topic, that there is no uninteresting topic.
Okay.
You only have to understand it, and then each topic is interesting.
Thank you for your valuable input.
Well, I think it's important that you follow the line of the career, as you mentioned, Myron. And on the other hand, you have to know that when you are, let's say, a baby, then it's not possible to choose a topic for your lifespan. There had been, let me give you an example. For example, in the beginning of the 20th century, there was a very interesting Italian surgeon who inaugurated the principle of osteodestruction. But sooner or later, he stopped it because there were no tools to investigate. So you have to be open to correct your direction in that way that you can use tools to prove principles. I think that is more important, and I'm sure after a while after your PhD, for example, PhD at Harvard, you have an amount of knowledge you can base on. And then it's much easier to find your personal way. But in the very beginning, I think you have to accept that only in the team they can form you and they can give you the possibilities to follow sooner or later a proper line. Yeah?
We should also say that there is not always finance available to support what you would like to do. So that definitely plays a role.
Okay.
So without support of your teacher, without support of your leader, it's impossible to start. You need this support. Of course, sometimes you will find someone who can do it alone, but this is 1% of
Maybe less.
Maybe less.
Okay, thank you very much. So next question is the present situation of young researchers. This field is highly competitive these days. This is very straightforward question. What does it take to become successful? And what are the challenges today for the young researchers? Professor Magnus?
I personally believe the time is very, very good for young researchers.
Really?
The possibilities in the universities are not bad. And I have been in the university more than 40 years, and even at the end and at the beginning, the young people has the chance to go in a direction they want in the team. They cannot change completely the direction. But the situation in the university is competitive with the clinical work you have to do. But on the other hand, the possibility in the lab and also the financial support is better as it has been in 1968 when I started.
Oh. How do you think about this? Do you have any advice for the young researchers?
I think that it's better to join, depending on what university you're at and what is being investigated. At the very beginning, it's good to play a role in the research. You don't have to, it doesn't have to be your research, but you have to learn about the techniques and the temperament of dealing with research. And as you get into 2 years or 4 years, you become more experienced and you can select topics if someone will support them.
Okay. And Professor Bacek, then how can young researchers boost their career through education? For example, like Aura in the Osteology Foundation, maybe?
They has to be open. They has to be open-minded. They need a far horizon, and for me, it's one of the most important points is to change the team sometimes for some time, to go to other universities, to see other concepts, to see other guidance, to see other possibilities. So it was my opinion since decades, and that I have to send, for instance, to send my assistants to other universities for 6 months, for 1 year, for 2 years. It depends. But for me, it's very, very important that young researchers increase their horizon, to see other people, to learn other concepts. I think this is very, very important.
Thank you. And what do you think about the challenges and how to success for the young generations?
Challenges?
Yes,
Well,
challenges.
I think one challenge is you have to make a decision.
Decision, okay.
Maybe right in the beginning, if you are more clinical orientated or if you are more on the scientific trip, because that will influence due to the resources that are possible. They are very competitive today, more competitive than in those days when we started. So in the clinical field, for example, a meeting gives a possibility for networking, looking for studies, for example, to bring enough cases together to come to, let's say, to an issue. If you are more on the scientific level, then you need your tools. You need to learn your tools. Otherwise, you cannot compete.
Okay.
I'm convinced of that.
Thank you. And here we have a last question. What is your personal advice for the next generation? Professor?
As I started in this session, it depends on your interest. It's not one topic which is the main topic in the next years. In the moment, perhaps soft tissue is more highlighted as bony regeneration, but it can change. For me, the basics of development, ectomesenchyme or something like this, would be a very interesting topic in the moment. To question why the soft tissue of the gum is better as others. The structure or signal proteins in this field, the basic, and therefore you need basic research, and as Neukamp told, you need tools to look in these questions.
Basic things and the interest.
Yeah?
I don't think there's one answer. I think your environment and the educational place that you are will have a lot to do with what type of research is available when you begin.
Yes.
And as you mature, you begin to have the opportunity to be more selective.
Okay.
But I believe, as Wacek also told, if you have a need of a special technique you have not available in your department, then you have to go out to a center where it is a daily work to learn it, the technique, and bring it back and to expand the situation in your own university.
In our city, that's a tough thing to do because the schools are all bidding for money against each other, and you have a much better chance if you stay within your own environment.
In Germany, it's a little bit different.
Yeah, well, obviously we are in different places, so
Yes,
we have
right.
different problems.
Yeah.
I think in the future, the greatest challenge is the digital development of medicine. And the young researcher must be in the front of this development of all digital possibilities. It's a must for the future for all disciplines.
Thank you. Professor Neukamp?
Well, it's more or less a certain kind of communicating in between. And I've been on some meetings with different colleagues from different parts in the world. And I have learned the lesson that people are different ticking. And one aspect is for young people, they have to be respectful to different opinions, to learn that. Yeah, that's important.
No, it's true.
That's very important. And to create for themselves a network of people with similar interests and background, let's say scientific background, that is important for me, I think.
Thank you, professors. Thank you for your valuable input. It was really valuable time personally. And also, I hope this session will be very helpful for our young audience and next generations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.